I thought it would be worth spending a little bit of time with you having a discussion about progressive pricing strategy on Fiverr, because this can make a huge difference to your income over time. The biggest problem, frankly, with Fiverr is knowing what to charge. I think the trap you can fall into is that of the imposter syndrome, where you don't feel you're worthy of a high price and you feel that the Fiverr platform is really only for low priced gigs. Well, actually, that is very far from the case. Although it started off when it was originally set up as a $5 gig, it's now a much more sophisticated and indeed lucrative platform to work on. The biggest risk, in my opinion, is not overcharging, but it's not that you don't charge enough for your gigs. The risk is that you underprice your gigs. Now, I've been working recently with a top-rated seller who's been giving me some fantastic advice, and she's enabled me to learn a little bit about her metrics and has really thrown a few of these issues into focus for me. Now, when you start on Fiverr, charging $5 for your basic gig is absolutely fine. I think you have to be prepared to start at the bottom and build your reputation, build the momentum of your offering and your reviews and your customer base. Of course, you have to start somewhere, and starting at $5 is totally fine. But the question you need to ask yourself is how and when should you consider raising your prices? Now, part of this you can assess quite simply by looking at your competitors, looking at their gigs, looking at what level they're at, whether they're a no-level seller, a level 1, level 2, or even a top-rated seller. Look as well at how many gigs they've completed and how many 5-star reviews they've got, and then try to place yourself somewhere in that range and understand where the range flows, how it looks, depending on what sort of gig you're offering. And it can be very revealing if you do this analysis. Now, I will say that what I'm about to share with you, you may need to vary depending on the sorts of gigs you're offering. I'm offering voiceover gigs, and that's what this really pertains to. But I do believe that on Fiverr, the thinking behind this video works for any sort of gig. So come on, let's go and have a look and see where we are. So the starting point that I was at was that when I compared my metrics to those of the top-rated seller, I was very surprised at the results. Now, she's completed around 1,800 gigs and has an average gig size of $102. I've completed around 800 gigs, just over, but I have an average gig size of $43. Her gig size, in terms of the average amount she gets per gig, is, broadly speaking, 2.5 times mine, 40 to 100. Interestingly, she charges $25 per 100 words. Now, the first thing about this is she has a high starting point. So it means that she has a really good minimum gig size. Even for a small gig, she's saying if you give me a gig of up to 100 words, it's going to be $25. So by having it on 100 words rather than 50 words, she's setting a high threshold for the starting point. I was offering $5 per 50 words. So it meant that I would have made more money if I'd offered $10 per 100 words. It was the same level of pricing, but for the smaller gigs, I would have made more money. And there were quite a few small little gigs that trickle in, and that probably has cost me several $100s over time, if not indeed more. I haven't tried to analyze that. So in comparison then, she charges $12.50 per 50 words to my $5 per 50 words, which is also, and this is no coincidence, 2.5 times more than I was charging. Now, I have changed my prices recently in response to this, but I should have done so a long time ago. Now, as you gain experience and 5-star reviews on Fiverr, you can increase prices. Now, just as an aside and a little top tip here, because I've just picked up on this as well. If you see, this is my list of gigs, and you can see at the bottom, and that's good. When you click on one of them, you get this little box come up, and at the bottom, you have this live portfolio. make sure for all your gigs that's turned on, because as you complete a gig, the gig goes into a portfolio of content. So you have lots and lots of samples for your audience to listen to and together. So if you have this option on your gig, and I don't know if it applies to all gigs across the whole of Fiverr, but you'd have thought it probably makes sense to do so, then you definitely want to have that ticked. So the point is, as you gain your experience and your 5-star reviews on Fiverr, you can increase your prices. So this is what I recommend, and certainly for my voice gigs, this is what I would like to have done had I known now what had I known then what I know now. So for your first 100 gigs, starting at $5 per 100 words is probably fine. That's quite a low. I mean, I was very close to that when I started off. I think I was at $5 per 75 words. After the first 100 gigs, then between 1 and 200, go to $10 per 100 words. Now note, that's a doubling of 5 till 10. From 2 to 300 gigs, you want to go to 15, and that's times, it's adding $5, but the increase is only 50%. It's 1.5 times 10. Between 3 and 400 gigs, then I would go to $20 per 100 words, which is an increase of 1 1/3. And then above 400 gigs, I would then get to the ceiling of $25 per 100 words, which is a 1.25 increase. So you can see the increase is rationing down, but I'm basically adding $5 per 100 words every time I take it up a step. So what does this mean for average gig size and income over time? Now, I'm working on the basis that the ratios, and this is an piece of analysis which is pretty simplistic, but it might still apply. So at $10 per 100 words, my average gig size, which is more or less where I am now, is $43. I'm at, I'm exactly where I am, but she's at $25 per 100 words, and she's making $102. So that suggests that there is a ratio between the price per 100 words and the average gig size, which is entirely logical. So while there is going to be some variation around this, depending on the type of work, and she's a top-rated seller, so she's probably attracting better clients and larger gigs. She's certainly attracting a lot more gigs. I still think it's worth taking this progressive pricing approach to building up your income. Now, had I followed this progression, my earnings for my first 500 gigs might have been in the region of $30,000. As you can see from here, $2,000 for the first 100, $4,000 for the next 100, etc. So given that I've got now to 800 gigs, my income for the gigs between 500 and 800 would have been another $30,000, because basically I would be making about $10,000 every 100 gigs. That means I would have made $60,000 gross. Now, to date, my gross earnings are around $30,000. I'm at about $26,000 net. So this is about half what I might have earned. And that is exactly why having a progressive pricing strategy is so very important. Now, increasing prices might seem a little scary. How will your customers react? My experience so far has actually been very positive. My repeat customers haven't questioned the increases, although with some, I have to admit, I've tried to be a little bit flexible, explained the rise, and just said, look, I've been speaking to a top-rated seller and she's advised me that I'm very much underpricing my gigs. And they know my work and they're very happy with it. And then maybe waived a gig extra or two to soften the blow. Now, one customer I've just done this for, it was a $100 gig. It should have been a $150 gig with the commercial gig extra, but I waived the commercial gig extra. And he gave me a $15 tip and also said, I'm very happy to pay the full rate next time. So customers are not going to be that, I think, reactive to it. And if people if new customers come along and they look at your prices and they don't want to pay that, then you're probably weeding out some of the lower quality customers and probably moving into a better quality, higher tier of customers going forward. And those better quality, higher tier customers will also be bringing you larger and more valuable gigs as well. Now, just to show you another piece of little analysis before we finish. In 2021, so far, my average gig size has been by month in January 3105, in February $48, in March $35.09, April $44, May $55, and June to date, and I brought the price increase early on in June, $72.26. So it's not a coincidence, and the numbers of gigs have all been in the mid to high teens. So it's not that I've had one or two really massive gigs. The average is genuinely going up. So I think while you may not necessarily make much more money, I believe that you will make as much money. You won't lose money, but you'll certainly do less work. So you're going to end up doing possibly fewer high value gigs, but you'll end up making as much, if not maybe a bit more money, rather than doing lots of small, lower value gigs. And of course, this raises the whole question of gig profitability, which got me thinking about that. But I'll discuss that in a separate video. So those are my thoughts on Fiverr gig progressive pricing strategy. I really think you have to have this at the back of your mind as you develop your Fiverr career, because if you don't, you're going to leave an awful lot of money on the table.